So, hello everyone. Happy to see you tonight. It is China time, 8 p.m. in Beijing. So it's 1 p.m. in Paris and 7 a.m. in New York for those who wake up very early. Thank you for coming. Today it is our second round of webinar Guochao Marketing, how to leverage it. Little bit introduction why I'm talking about this. So why Guochao? Later on, we will tell you first of all what is Guochao. We study together consumers' perceptions, how to leverage Guochao, and the Q&A. So this is our storyline. Before talking about Guochao, a short introduction about why we are talking about Guochao. So we know that Guochao is a national trend, which is actually we want to emphasize that Guochao is not only exclusive for Chinese brands, but also how to leverage international brand, leverage the international brands. A few words about Daxue Consulting for those who don't know who we are. So we are actually a China-focused market research and consultant companies located in China. We've been founded since 10 years ago, so congratulations for ourselves. Our main teams are actually in Shanghai with around up to 40 consultants full-time today. But also we do have a global presence right now, including APAC, US, and the Europe. So what do we do as solutions? So we provide solutions, including, let's say, three dimensions. First of all, we provide market intelligence by combining traditional and up-to-date research tools. And also we provide marketing strategy and consultant services as outputs. People may want to understand who are our clients in the past 10 years. So in summary, I would say we are covering around 5 to 8 verticals, including both B2B and B2C in different areas such as F&B, cosmetics, luxury, retail, and different. So you can see quite a lot of logos we have been cooperated. Storyline. Before we are talking about storyline, I'd like to introduce myself, Yuan, Associate Directors, as one of the main speaker, but also who worked for Daxue more than 7 years. And here is also Steffi. I will let you to introduce yourself.
Sure. So hi everyone. So I'm Steffi. I'm research director here at Daxue Consulting, mainly working on B2C projects. So I've been dealing in the past with some clients, fashion, beauty industry, and F&B industries, and often the question of Guochao is coming in the discussion.
Yes. All right, just a reminder after outline. So what is a Guochao? We're talking about the definition in a more granular way, therefore including the evolutions, things last 5 years. The second one is about Daxue consumers' attitude. We're talking about how people perceive Guochao, especially among the Gen Z, which is a very interesting topic today. And the third part will be how to leverage it. We will give 3 dimensions or directions. First is like potential elements that you could leverage. Second is like how brands play with those elements, including both international and local brands, with a very up-to-date cases. And third one is recap and key takeaways. We do have around 10 minutes Q&A session. So if you have any questions, you can write down during our presentations and let us know later on. Yeah. So let's start. We start from what is Guochao as definitions. We can see here, Guochao actually as initial definition is a national wave, is popularized by Gen Z. Gen Z was one of the most targeted audience for this Guochao included element concepts. Here you can see that 95% of Chinese consumers served, we found a survey, they said they like products that incorporated Guochao design and elements. So what is Guochao today? Original Guochao is national trend, so refers to, let's say, Chinese brands, Chinese design, culture, spirits, and products made in China. And also Gen Z said like they are actually one of the main force to support this Guochao linked brands or product, which we will see later. Talk about Guochao, we have to separate these two characters. Each Chinese characters has a different meanings. So Guochao, what is Guo? Representative image or expressions of the country of origin. I believe people would understand the country of origin. So including, let's say, we can see there is a four, let's say, main directions for you to understand. Chinese history and culture, we can see, let's say, a historical culture museum and locations, lunar calendars, Chinese ethnic, which we do have, let's say, 55 minority, including one Han, so in total we have 56. National spirits, so we talk about Chinese New Year, we talk about Chinese Baijiu, Maotai, one of signature brands in China. Hot pot, dumplings, but it's not only here, just like some image to tell you what could be the spirits, but we have more than that. And of course, we will talk about aesthetics and taste. Chinese lifestyle, therefore we talk about what they like today as style, as image, as mood board. And of course, the way they live, we can see a large amount of apps they are using, that we know that Chinese people today is the most population using, let's say, leverage the digital worlds very well. So that is Guo as first screenshots. And how about Chao? So Chao, the translation or meaning behind is that it is very stylish, trendy, and playful. It can be a brand, it can be apps, it can be outfit. You can see Douyin is one of the most trendy apps to purchase the most, let's say, the popular brands or popular pieces, popular categories. And Chao does not exist today actually. Chao is, I mean, I in the 80后, supposed the 80s. So when I was about 15 years old or 10 years old, we have already talked about the Chao, which initially come from, let's say, Hong Kongese people. We think they are very stylish. And today, this is somehow parts of the Chao referring to. And we can see today what is Chao representing as a mood board or screenshot today. So when we combine Guo and Chao, it is somehow a fusion between the Chinese culture and trendy fashion. Okay, we put a wave here just to show, let's say, how you feel about the vibes. As evolution, we have to talk about it as well, since it's very important. 4 main dimensions. Okay, so first of all, we have to talk about Chinese brands, since they are racing since 2018, which is around 4 or 5 years ago. The second, we're talking about international brands. They are becoming more proactive. When we talk about proactive, meaning that they are faster in a more granular way to provide Chinese brands, Chinese innovations, localized design, a more suitable communication strategy, therefore to better engage with consumers emotionally. Because when we talk about Guochao, we talk about emotional engagement and connections, since it's quite linked to the spirits. And of course, we're talking about luxury brands, since it's very important. They came a little bit later, so since 2020, they are refining their strategy. When we talk about refining, meaning that they are trying to better understand us in terms of spirits and lifestyle, and they have better, let's say, appropriate and illustrations to tell consumers how I understand Chinese culture in a more authentic way. By the end of this presentation, I have today a very, very fresh, up-to-date bonus for us to understand how how luxury brands demonstrate their understanding of Chinese culture in an updated way. Last things is definitions. The definition is also extending since 2021, so it's no longer a limited style. Okay, it's not a design, it's more than that. Basically, when we talk about positive spirits, positive value, and also meaningful attributes among the Chinese audience. So that is actually very favorable by our domestic overall policies. We have listed a few of them, then you can see later on as well. So 4 directions for us to go. Talk about evolution Guochao, we can see we have observed through Baidu Index since 2018, thanks to the State Council and Tmall, they have helped to push these waves. And we can see there is a 3 line. In blue is Guochao, green actually is domestic brands, and actually orange is Chinese brands. We can see since last 5 years, Guochao keep increasing with a few peaks. One thing. And second is actually on the other side, in 2021, we do have this anti-Xinjiang cotton movements who helped actually sort of, let's say, reshaped this consumers' overall preferences between local brands and international brands. Now we talk about, because you remember, we talk about 4 main directions. So first of all, talk about Chinese brands or racings. So that's including both old and emerging Chinese brands using Guochao spirits. So for the old one, or for the old one means like brands with a certain history, we will say around 100 or 80 years ago, for instance, Huili is one of them. So Guochao helped them actually to keep this forgotten brands having a second life. But also we have new brands, for example, for Forbidden City Wenchuang, which is one of the most famous and popular IP being leveraged as well by collaborating with the Imperial Palace, parts of Forbidden Cities. There's a lot of products being developed by this kind of IP. We will talk about later as well. So Chinese consumer also increasingly prefer domestic brands with 3, let's say, reasons behind as well. So first of all, Chinese Gen Z are now proud of themselves and proud of being Chinese due to many reasons. One of the reasons could be the cultural enhance, but also increased purchasing power, but also understanding of Chinese culture. So there's one day a brand told me like, so do you think Chinese people are buying Nike, buying, let's say, Chinese brands more than Nike for sportswear, for instance, Huili? Okay, so my answer is they may not have a higher preferences, but they are willing to buy more Chinese brands, but somehow influence also international brands' market share on the overall speaking. So that's the first thing. The second is like increasing tensions in global. When we talk about maybe it's more representative between US and China. So having strengthened patriotism. Therefore, Chinese people are willing to support more Chinese brands or local brands. The last one we'll talk about Xiaohongshu, growth rate products views on Xiaohongshu. We can see the percentage of affordable Guochao or mid-high-end Guochao products are increasing. Leading e-commerce platforms. When we talk about that, we talk about the JD, Tmall, Douyin, which is TikTok Chinese version, Xiaohongshu. We talk about also live streaming. So people are also trying to push or selling more products and brands within Guochao elements, including Guochao linked brands, or selling with selling points of Guochao concept. Few industry we want to go. So Chinese brands are beginning to dominate the mass markets. We can see the Xiaohongshu is very similar to Instagram, but also with very rich content. Now we'll talk about cosmetics, and we can see that Guochao brands gain a great popularity because of its lower price, or we will talk about affordable. One thing I have to clarify today is that affordable is not meaning cheap. It's worth for money. Basically, for same amount of money we spend, we can have a better products. Can be quality, can be user experience, it can be what fits better to your needs. Okay, so affordable is like for the same amount of money, I can have a better quality for this affordable product. Now, therefore, we can see that here affordable Guochao brands have increased as reading volume in 2020. On the other side, luxury Guochao brands still have a minor segment. It's niche, but it's happening. We can a little bit talk about it later on. We can show, I have the showcases. Evolution for cosmetics. One of the most famous brands, popular brands, is Forest. We can see where the peoples are consuming as well. So Tmall domestic brands cosmetics consumptions in 2020, most of them are most of them half. Okay, I correct. So half of them are actually in lower tier cities. So actually, they have a good penetration across the city tiers, meaning top tier to very lower tier cities. Okay. Then we talk about luxury brands as well. When we talk about luxury brands, we can see Chinese luxury brands go beyond nationalism. So people are willing to become trendsetters. When we talk about luxury, we are not talking about premium, we're not talking about mass markets, we're talking about luxury. So for them, three elements to be understand: Chinese brands, Chinese designers, or Chinese designs, or Chinese culture. Okay. So consumers actually urge brands to adopt or represent Chinese culture with Chinese eyes. So these things can be very much appreciated. We also talk about few elements. We talk about many brands that have been doing Guochao. So few highlights. For example, for Li Ning, have cooperated. Actually the first brands started Guochao waves, being talked a lot among Chinese consumers. So that is the first version of Guochao. So it's like 5 years ago. But today, again, a reminder: Guochao keep evolving. So Dunhuang Museum, brand colors, for example, yellow or red combination. So those are somehow signature, but not only. Okay, Dunhuang is one of our most signature and famous historical locations. And ICH, intangible cultural heritage. So we will talk about later as well. Huaxi talk about it, why they are famous, why they've been liked. Few elements being leveraged as well. So Oriental beauty. So you can see what is the top beauties today, Du Juan, being very much liked by young Chinese consumers, which is quite representative and with good positive perceptions. On the other side, in terms of packaging design, in terms of color patterns, we can see that Miao, so Miao again, one of our minority ethnics. It's actually, they have one of the most sophisticated designer colors. So actually, those brands being also using this kind of elements to leverage brands, which is very interesting. We can see the color, we can see how the color is the most important elements to play among the makeup. Makeup first is makeup. We talk about also international brands are more proactive. What that meaning that they are giving newer brands in a faster speed. Now it's like every 6 months, every 3 months, we have new products in Family Marts to discover. Family Marts is one of the amazing convenience stores for us to discover new flavors and packagings for snacks, for instance. So we're talking about the F&B industry. So you can see when we incorporate Guochao elements, we can see this spicy breast dark neck flavors, salted egg yolk, or dumpling flavors for chips. And we can talk about also this Coca-Cola with Osman toast flavor. The best, let's say, smells during October, November in Shanghai, which is very representative. You cannot find anywhere else outside of China, I would say. So it's very, let's say, linked with Chinese culture, roots with Chinese culture, and from international brands. Another example, so which is a little bit different. Besides a faster speed, we also initiated a new brand or sub-brand. So Nestle's Cantonese-inspired ice cream brand is called Yue Xingyi. Okay, so Yue Xingyi, Cantonese brands, it's, let's say, one of the most sophisticated cuisine in China, and how to leverage it and what they have collaborated. For example, 贵妃最美丽. Okay, so it's 贵妃, Yang Guifei is one of the beauties in ancient histories. Tang Dynasty Tang. We will talk about it with the recap. Lychee also, so lychee is her favorite fruits. So therefore they combine this kind of IT and IP, I would call it IP together, to be more engaged with in terms of design, in terms of spirits, and in terms of product innovations. International brands are refining. What I mean, so we know that practice before 2020, there's some practice among luxury brands. For instance, we'll talk about Burberry, we'll talk about also Nike, we'll talk about Dior. They have tried a few elements. For instance, we put the Guochao, the fortune fu on the scarves, on their signature scarves. However, people might thinking that this kind of characters might be a little bit eerie symbol, so a little bit not fashion or not pretty enough. Another case is like Fa is like fortune, Fu is like lucky. Okay, so actually it's very positive value in Chinese culture. But when you put them together, you can have a different meaning getting fat. Okay, so it can be a little bit controversial sometimes, or for Dior, it's similar cases as Burberry. So people may think, okay, maybe this kind of design, they appreciate the efforts that brands been doing. However, it could be a little bit outdated. And that is a lot of, let's say, early stage of luxury brands with what they're doing. So how about today or later on, we will show cases. So later on, brands are doing a little bit better. They are progressing, they are refining. So they are using, for instance, more updated or trendy elements into the brands. For example, Chinese New Year, which is one of the most important traditional festivals in China, is like Christmas for people in the US or in the Western countries or in Europe. And also Piqiu, okay. So we know like we have a lot of traditional elements, but we are not representing in a very traditional way. So that is how Chao or trendy meaning. So you have to be fashionable enough, accurate enough, up to date enough, but authentic. Okay, it's not superficial, it's not fake. So that is somehow the elements being combined together. They are refining their structure as well. So the Guochao have been also influenced somehow by the local young generations' preferences and movements. We can see some, let's say, trendy behaviors they are doing now. For instance, they like streetwears a lot among Chinese consumers. They are more chill, they are more laid back. So they are not very, let's say, sophisticated or chic or elegant way, but in a more relaxed way to show, to express themselves as stylish or express themselves. The second is about Chinese rap or hip hop. So that's also being influenced by many television shows actually is produced in China. Many Chinese rappers being popular since last 2 years and generate high popularities. Of course, including the KOLs. We can talk about later on as well. So young generation, they're more appreciating these self-expressions in their own way. People may have questions about what's the difference between domestic products and Guochao. The definitions are totally different. For a domestic products, it is not necessarily a Guochao, but it's a product that is made in China, but no cultural attributes is very important. But for Guochao products, it's trendy, it's fashionable, being mentioned, but also sense of fashion by niche designer could be. And one specific categories of domestic products has spiritual and material meaning with national sentiment and representative Chinese culture. So that is Guochao. Both international and Chinese brands can leverage elements or this concept very well. We will talk about much more later on. Okay. So why Guochao? We know that today and in the recent year, we are more and more we have higher attentions on Chinese policies. Okay, since 2017 till actually today, we have around, let's say, 10 regulations that are favorable for this cultural productions or domestic or rural specific revitalizations, which is handcrafts. There is 3 regulations are very important. I would say might have higher impacts on the overall market. So what those regulations can help this Guochao movements, they will encourage brands to do more. So meaning that ease to communications, ease to branding strategy, in both virtual or offline. So we know that could be that happened 5 years ago. It happened and keep happening and in the future. Okay. So attitude, I will go a little bit faster because we do have a few highlights. So what impressions come to your mind when you think about Chinese brands? So this insights actually come from in-depth interview with the Gen Z by Daxue Consulting. We can see the most visible keywords is affordable. Of course, we do have imitations, but we can see the position is less important. It could be even fewer in the futures. And we have good quality, novelty, creativity, tradition together. So, but again, affordable should be one of the most, let's say, the most important keywords to keep in mind. Lower price, practical, and competitive quality. This is somehow people give as perceptions of Guochao elements or Chinese brands. What's your first impression when we talk about Guochao? Fashion comes to the first. We know later on we will know what kind of industries are highly involved, but it is not limited to those industries. We will see later on. So cultural, Chinese elements, clothing. That's somehow what have been observed till today. Guochao in luxury. We understand the confidence, we understand the patriotism, we also understand higher value for money, which I explained. One thing is also very interesting is that people, the brands with Guochao or luxury brands are more attentive to customer care with a wider range of services or categories. So that could be a little bit different as well compared to international brands. Okay. A trend. So one thing I want to highlight here, increased interest in Chinese brands over the last 10 years through Baidu search. So we can see that online there is a reshape of portions between overseas brands and Chinese brands. And today, it's not today, actually, it's 3 years ago. So today is much more than that. Chinese brands have a higher portion, 70% as in index. It is not 100% statistic, but we can see the trends already. Why do Chinese people prefer Chinese brands? So 3 things: traditional culture, supporting local business, which is very important. We'll talk about later, and the value for money mentioned already. So 60% Gen Z actually served. We conducted a survey about this concept. Also purchased, let's say, Chinese luxury brands. Well, that's here the luxury is a little bit in the more broader sense rather than very accurate sense, because we're talking about the consumer's perceptions. Comparisons between impressions of different country of origin, which I've mentioned before. So features of American, Japanese, European, and Korean. American, we talk about technology brands, bold, oversized, and low price. Okay, but of course, technologies represented much higher portions. When we talk about Japanese brands, we talk about good quality and delicates. Of course, we do have 3 to 4 elements following. It is minor. However, it's still part of their feature. We have to combine them together. It's dimensions, a few dimensions together. Korean culture, Korean brands. So the features are entertainment industry. Everyone knows about it. K-pop, K-culture, which is very famous among Chinese generations today, cosmetics, and European, high price, fashion, and luxury. So this is somehow, let's say, the top 2 or 3 keywords representative as a country, a brand from a country. The impression very important. So Chinese culture, Chinese brands, what is today? Affordable. So affordable is not cheap, but it's value for money. What do you think of foreign brands, misunderstanding of Chinese consumer, about Chinese consumer? One thing to highlight, which I mentioned before, is that many Chinese Gen Z feel like foreign brands actually understand Chinese culture in a very superficial way or super surface level. Okay, therefore there's less, let's say, emotional connections. They may see it, but they are not connected. Okay. This is things that we are, but international brands, especially luxury brands, which is quite difficult, challenging for them to engage with this Guochao elements. Over the last 5 years, have you purchased more products from Chinese brands? Chinese Gen Z again, so we can see yes more than no, females more than male. One of the reasons I have to highlight here is cosmetics, one of the most popular brands and well-done industries in China. Therefore, females are really higher or higher. And also, we're talking about Gen Z. If we talk about electrical vehicle, maybe it's different. Gen Z, maybe they buy a little bit less vehicle. Okay, we'll talk about later as well. So yes, I have purchased more from domestic brands for their innovation marketing strategy, but also for the price. I don't buy because I don't familiar with that, and which is quite interesting. So what are the impactful Guochao brands among Gen Z today? So 3 questions we have asked. What brands come to your mind? What brands have you purchased? And what brands incite national pride for you? Okay. In conclusion, few industries being popped up. Apparel, beauty are clearly the keystones today. Electrical vehicle, I call it EV here, are racing as well. But also one interesting thing is that Chinese history, artifacts and modern marketing actually are here. So strategy seems to be the right tools to leverage. Later on, we'll talk about that as well. So you can see Li Ning, Huili, Hanhuohuo, Huaxizi Forest, Perfect Diary, one of the best examples for private traffic. Gugong in Forbidden City's Imperial Palace. Huawei. Okay. So those things are how they perceive these brands. It's very interesting to look at. As electric vehicle, NIO and Xiaopeng, but we believe there are much more than that. What about foreign brands you think incorporate Guochao elements? For example, Balenciaga, Gucci, Adidas, Nike. So well, we listed those brands here because they have a higher impact, I would say, on the Chinese market, or higher discussion, a volume of discussion among Chinese Gen Zs. So what do you think would be the future evolution of Guochao? So one thing to highlight, most of them are optimistic. So not only about Chinese policies that are supporting the Guochao movements, but also the Gen Zs are feeling optimistic in the future. Of course, they show some concerns. For instance, it's not the right demonstration, not the right product, it's not incorporated in a right way, okay? Or it is not innovative enough. So it is not good quality. I have issues on quality. Okay, so this kind of things can be more further studied. How to do the Guochao in the right way. But overall speaking, very optimistic. So how to leverage? Steffi, I will let you to talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. So now that we understand very well, like what is Guochao and what are the consumer perceptions, what are the consumer doubts, the question you may be wondering right now is, right, I get it. How can I really leverage Guochao as a brand, no matter the industry you're in? I know in the call right now we have people from beauty, I saw people from fashion, and also people from F&B industry and a few others as well. So right now I'm going to spend the next minutes to explain you like what are some things you can leverage for Guochao in 2022, considering the evolution that you want explained, as well as how to avoid the risk of cultural appropriation. So I will start with, as you can see on the title, maybe the most obvious thing, but how to choose the right elements for a Guochao marketing campaign, and some rules that I usually have in mind on like how to avoid cultural appropriation. So very often when I discuss with my clients, I hear the question of like, can we just treat a Guochao campaign as an IP collaboration campaign or as a co-branding campaign? What is the difference? And yeah, the point is basically, is it the same thing when we do a campaign? And actually, this question does make a lot of sense. There is a lot of similarities between a Guochao campaign and an IP collaboration or co-branding campaign. There are three main similarities, I would say. Number one, very often when you want to do Guochao as a foreign brand, you will actually do an IP collaboration or a co-branding campaign. So you will do a co-branding campaign, for example, with a Chinese brand, a Chinese designer, a small Chinese label, because it's an easy way to go on the Guochao sphere with quite a low risk. So we just put examples here. You can see on the slide from Heiqi Xicha, which is a milk tea brand, very popular in China because they're the #1 example of a Chinese brand doing many IP collaborations in China. So you can see in the past 4 years, they have done more than 80 IP collaborations. And every time, you can see an example here on the bottom of the slide, every time that they do an IP collaboration, we see peaks in terms of search. So this is from Baidu Index. Even if it's a small brand, a niche brand, working with them, collaborating with them, usually it has very high visibility on social media. And that's why a Guochao campaign and an IP collaboration campaign also can be similar, because usually with one or the other, you can achieve the same results. So that's the second point. You can go viral, maintain the popularity of your brand, and also enhance the emotional connection with the consumers, both with an IP collaboration campaign and with a Guochao campaign. And number three, this is what I'm going to explain here, is on the left part of that slide. It's why I'm thinking that it's still quite similar in a way. It's because the way you work with a Guochao campaign should be the same way as when you're co-branding, you're doing a co-branding, which means when you're collaborating with another brand, you need to respect the brand values, the brand features. So for example, you're going to respect the other brand visual identity when you will incorporate on your product. You're going to respect the tone of voice of the brand so that you have a perfect combination. That's exactly the same principle for Guochao. The element of Chinese culture you're going to use on your product, on your campaign, has to be respected. And to be more precise, because it's maybe very obvious what I'm saying, you have a few rules that I put here. You can see the top 3 rules that you need to follow if you want to respect that example, that element of Guochao that you're using. So first is this one: make it authentic. Yuan talked about it a little bit earlier. What I mean in make it authentic, it's 2 main points. Number 1, you really need to show that you respect that element of Chinese culture. So if you're thinking about your Guochao campaign with the eye of a Western consumer, and if the target of your Guochao campaign is also Western consumers, you're probably going in the wrong direction, because it means that your perspective is wrong. It's from a Western consumer, and it should really be from a Chinese consumer, because you don't need to add your Western touch to that Guochao campaign. This is where you have the risks. So make it authentic. Don't blend it with your Western identity much. And the second part of making it authentic is give the credit. Make sure that you give the credits, that you announce the reference you're using. So for example, if you're using a design from a specific dynasty or from a specific population in China, explain it, give the credits. Otherwise, it may just look as like cultural appropriation or just result in a big bad buzz on social media. Number two, it would be have a clear, up-to-date understanding of the Chinese elements you're leveraging. One more time, that sounds pretty obvious, but what we mean by that is very often we are requested to do some research to find what kind of elements of Guochao this brand can use, one of our clients can use. And we're doing that research. And this research, if you're doing one to understand which element to leverage, it should not only be the research on the past. So you need obviously to have the research on that reference from the Ming Dynasty, for example, like where does it come from and the whole history behind it. But you really need to make sure that you also do your strong research that is about like the current perception about Chinese consumers on that reference. So your research, don't focus too much on the past, but look at what people currently are expecting when you talk about that. And finally, of course, include exquisite features. And that's all the things I'm going to explain right after. You have examples of elements here that you can include in your Guochao campaign or on your product, which would be like traditional sounds, music, history, like minority ethnic cultures, national arts. I'm going to explain right now more about it, but that would be the main rules if you want to choose and make a good Guochao marketing campaign. So let's deep dive into these elements right now. So number one, we said visual. So that would be first, everything that is Chinese colors and Chinese cultural elements. So here we're talking about design. In terms of colors, of course, you have a very wide range here. I just want to give you some inspirations. You could have traditional color palette from traditional art. That's what that Yuan was just mentioning before is doing. You could have the national palette, so it's usually a bit more chosen by local brands. So like Li-Ning, for example, is using gold and red. That's also a choice that you have. Obviously, that's a very obvious choice. But you will also go to something that's a bit more nostalgic. I'll get back to this example later of like using like color palettes, for example, from the 90s. This is what a Chinese brand called Scent Library is doing. I'll get back to this example later. So Chinese colors is usually a very good visual way to incorporate Chinese design elements. And you also have cultural elements. This, maybe you're familiar with some of them. Chinese floral patterns, that is usually an easy way to go. It's still relevant in 2022, even if we have been using it since 2018. Chinese landscape paintings and traditional patterns. That's for the design. Beyond design, examples of element you can use is element of history more. And this is where we want to bring up the concept of Guoxue, which is basically history and country knowledge. So first part was on design. Here is more the elements that are related to the history, the cultural knowledge. So overall, Guoxue comes from like learning, and as we put here, erudition of the country. So that would be the learning of the Chinese culture. So it goes a bit beyond than just the design that you saw earlier. And here you will have elements such as, for example, Chinese silk, ancient poems. It's very interesting to work on that. You see many perfume brands using Chinese ancient poems right now. Architecture, any interpretation of Chinese history. So from history books, calligraphy, and characters. So all of this is more from the Guoxue part compared to design that I just explained before. And talking about history, there is also something that's kind of like ready to be leveraged content that you can use in your storytelling, in your Guochao campaign. It's basically Chinese dynasties. So what's very interesting here to me is that each dynasty obviously has its specificities, and actually most of them are very easily recognizable among Chinese people. So it means that that's what I just said. It's a bit ready to be leveraged content because it's obviously relevant to Chinese history. It's going to be recognizable by Chinese consumers, and the link is very easily implemented. So as you can see on this slide, so we'll listed like for all of the Chinese dynasties, you can see the elements that you could use. So either the element of the design of that dynasty or of the history of that dynasty. And you can see here that we put in green what is often leveraged by brands. So you can see, for example, like the terracotta warriors, like Bing Mayong. Here you can see the I think here would be the Sanxing Dui here, or the tea culture Cha Wenhua, for example, from the Song Dynasty. And in blue, you have all the elements that we have identified as being less leveraged by brands. So as you can see, like it's still pretty big. So you have the Mongolian culture, you have dance, operas from the Ming Dynasty, for example. So it's still pretty large, and that's obviously just an example. It's not at all an exhaustive list. So to me, this is really an interesting part that is leveraged by brand, but that will open many possibilities for you if you're considering Guochao campaign with strong implications with Chinese history and not only design. And I just want to show you now in how you could use dynasties, and probably a question you're asking yourself right now is, as a foreign brand, can I also really leverage dynasty, even if I don't have the knowledge and maybe I don't have the credibility to leverage dynasty? And that's why I want to show you a few examples of both Chinese brands and international brands leveraging dynasties. So on the two next slides, you see 6 main case studies of Chinese and international brands using dynasties in the design, in the content of the campaign. And I'm just for today going to focus on international brands, but we will send the deck, as Yuan said, we will send the deck to all of you after. And I saw in the chat as well, someone is asking if we will send the recording. So don't worry, right after this webinar, we will send the deck and the recording. So 2 main campaigns that I personally was super interested in. On the right side here, you can see a campaign from Air Jordan. So it's actually a limited edition product that they did in collaboration with a Chinese label, which is called The Clot. And this is basically a streetwear label from Edison Chen, for some of you who may know. And they actually used the design of the Bing Mayong, the terracotta warriors, on their shoes. So to create like kind of to represent the plates of the Bing Mayong directly on the shoe. So that worked really well. It was limited edition and it has a really high talkability as well on social media. And the second example is actually also from a shoe brand. So same as here from Converse. So they actually did something that's also an element that brands are leveraging from dynasties, which is the blue and white purfling, which is, one more time, easily recognizable from consumers. And they really well incorporated this element on the shoe, not only by just adding the pattern, but they collaborated much more with their brand ambassador that they have, the Chinese brand ambassador, to nicely incorporate the elements on the shoe and adding kind of a ribbon around the shoe with this element as well. Same, it's till today even something that people are trying to buy on Tmall, Taobao, even if it's from 2020. So a very good example that I personally really like. And I just wanted to give you right now a few additional case studies to give you some inspiration on how to leverage Guochao. I will just share with you 2 of my favorite case studies, which I believe usually like is very good food for thought. So here we're listing some very interesting case studies from 2018 to, you will see on the other slide, 2022. Here on this slide, one of my favorite, and I just mentioned earlier, it's the one in the middle. It's Scent Library. So it's a Chinese perfume brand, which is also doing ancillaries, so like body care out of their perfume. And they're really leveraging the nostalgia concept that you have in Guochao, which to me is an easy way to go as a foreign brand if you want to leverage Guochao, working on nostalgia marketing, which means basically targeting the childhood memories of Gen Z or other generations is usually a good way to avoid too much backlash. And Scent Library, they did a product line that was supposed to be limited edition, but actually it's not. So today you can still buy it because it was working really well. They did a whole product line based on one candy brand, which is called 大白兔奶糖. It's called White Rabbit in English. It's a candy brand from Shanghai that a lot of young people used to eat when they were like children. So for most people, the flavor, the scent of 大白兔奶糖 reminds them of their childhood. It's very well associated with Chinese culture, and therefore this line is working really well. So it's a very good way to express nostalgia marketing that is still working really well today. As you can see on the slide, we could call this Guochao wave as retro Guochao or like vintage Guochao. And on the second slide here, you can see a bit more recent examples. I'm just going to mention the one from Kenzo because personally, I think it's a good counter example of using zodiac signs in a campaign. So very often you all see these brands from the fashion beauty industry using the zodiac signs like the year of the tiger, the year of the ox, etc. On their products. Kenzo was smart enough to mainly leverage that when it was the year of the tiger, and that's one very good capsule they have done for the Chinese market because it's a classic element of Kenzo, you know, the tiger, obviously. So it was really a golden opportunity for them to leverage the year of the tiger icon, so the tiger, but making it not appear too fake, not appear just made for China. So really people were really like interested in that because it's a really good example of incorporating it in your brand identity. So here what we're showing as well is you can see that these successful campaigns from 2018 to 2022 are what we're showing is that the evolution is still very positive, and it's Guochao has been working very well in terms of talkability and sales since 2018 up to right now, up to this summer. So we're still very optimistic regarding the future of Guochao for the years to come. And now my favorite part of the presentation is also analyzing the examples which got some controversial feedback. To understand a little bit more like what kind of bad buzz you could have and how to avoid it. So I'm going to be quick on that. Maybe you've heard a few of these campaigns. I think Yuan mentioned already a little bit of the Nike one, but Balenciaga is also a very good example. So this three campaigns you see here, as well as the campaigns you see on that part, are all campaigns that receive some controversial feedback. So it's not necessarily a failure in terms of sales or in terms of communication, but it's a very good example to see what potentially to avoid, or at least what to be prepared for in terms of PR as well. So one example from Balenciaga that I'm going to use here, and another one on the other slide. Balenciaga, they did this Chinese Valentine's Day Qixi festival 2 years ago, and they wanted to like work on like older memes, like kind of stereotypes memes that were super successful when we were like teenagers in China. And actually it was not really well perceived, because if you want to go to stereotypes on purpose, you still have a very big risk that people believe that it's still a very, very big stereotype of Chinese culture. So people just believe that it was very cliche. And you can see that the hashtags that were saying like, this campaign is like is not of a good taste, or like it's insulting China, got like hundreds of millions views totally. So that's usually something that could inspire us on like, just don't go into something that could be too stereotyped and too vintage on purpose, even if you're doing it with a sense of humor. And the second one I want to use here is the one from Adidas and Shita, Adidas Haiti, that you can see here, because on like, if you look at it as an external, like with an external point of view, it looks very interesting. But the thing is that so they did like a limited edition of shoes using the visual identity of Xicha, so with like purple, pink, etc. However, two main comments were coming from this one. First, people were not quite getting the idea of like a tea brand, which is supposed to be super like flavorful and smell really good with shoes. So there's kind of a discrepancy with the two together, two product categories together. And second, a lot of people were just saying there is no story behind it. You just take the visual identity of Xicha and you put on the shoes, which just look like the shoes that people inside the store could wear. People working as Xicha could wear. It looks like staff shoes. So that was one of the feedback that we got. And why I want to emphasize on this one is because what you really need to keep in mind when you use the Guochao campaign is that your product is interesting. The design you're going to do is definitely the main point. However, you still need a strong storytelling behind it. Otherwise, your campaign is just meaningless. You're not going to have meaning on that. And to conclude on some tips to avoid this type of controversial feedback, this is quite personal, I would say, but there isn't. So one thing is make sure to have a very strong storyline and you communicate very clearly about it. It's not only about the product. But the second thing that maybe is a bit more personal and open to discussion is very often I'm asked like, can we use the Chinese festivals to launch our Guochao campaigns? The answer is yes. However, I would strongly recommend to avoid the Chinese New Year because most of the brands are doing something on Chinese New Year, are doing a capsule for the Chinese market that is based on the Chinese zodiac, so on the Chinese Lunar New Year sign. And very often it's just going to be perceived as a promotional move, as something that you just want to like reach Chinese consumers, but without real storytelling. You're just using the zodiac sign. So I would strongly recommend to avoid Chinese New Year because you have just a higher chance of being like perceived as just the promotional move. And I think that's pretty much it from my side. And I think Yuan will just summarize quickly all these tips in a few slides.
All right, let's go to recap. It's 9 o'clock, 9 p.m. in China. We might have around 15 minutes to go. I will try to be faster. In recap and takeaway, we can see, let's say we have did a short summary about international brands using Guochao elements or concepts, 3 main directions, how to what's the pro and what's the cons. Okay, but one thing how I have to highlight is that Guochao is not a holistic solutions to win the competition. Before doing Guochao, you have to understand what is your objective, what are your expectations. They can do many things for you, but you have to understand if it's boosting the sales, if it's enhance your brand images, or if it is, let's say, maintain your market dynamism, or then you can select the right elements or Guochao based on your objectives behind. Okay. So 3 main directions being observed and still can be played. Brand crossover will have your illustrations. Support local cultural developments. We know that being supported and favorable by local governments as well on policies. And the third one is dedicated design, which is much more important for attract consumers' attentions, especially to gain their appreciation on the taste and design. The pro and cons, just to go faster. So exposure rates, popularities can be leveraged by brand crossover. However, to avoid is that to wrong IP to create the bad buzz, or the wrong co-branding can lower down your brand image or tonality, which is very important. And support local cultural development. One thing to highlight is that it is sort of, let's say, high-level investments, need a longer time to monitor, and with a little bit, let's say, invisible ROI to track. But on the other hand, it is really helpful for brands to, let's say, build up their credibility and legitimacy, which is very important or useful for a mid-long-term function. And a double win, of course, for qualitative image on the market. So we're actually building or hatching a smaller, let's say, brand in China with still, let's say, your brand DNA and the blood. And the third one is a little bit quicker. So you design a product with dedicated elements, however, again, studied better and deeper in terms of taste, design, preferences of Chinese culture, to really build up this first of all connections, to leverage the volume of discussions, but also to trigger consumer interest of your product. So not only the brand, but also the product. Well, few examples here. So brand crossover. Middle is about support local cultural development. The third one is dedicated design. Co-branding as highlights, as brand crossover. We can see that I personally like this Pepsi Cola China Daily. It shows you a really, let's say, a vintage feeling. So we can see that's around, let's say, in the years of 60s or 70s image on the China Daily. And with this kind of, let's say, a pale color with a little bit yellowish patterns, which were really representative, authentic as co-branding products or packaging, actually. The second one actually support local culture. Well, the first one we're talking about ICH, which is one of the biggest things in China as well. We talk about a lot, not only about luxury culture, but daily. We're talking about ICH is intangible culture heritage. For information, so globally, China's ICH is ranked as top one in terms of amount of ICH. It's around 43 or 42, followed by Japan, French. So this somehow is showing the importance of ICH. Inner-land blending. So you can do a little bit, let's say, actual cooperation, such as LVMH did in Yunnan or in Ningxia. So invested as line productions, which being liked by or tagged actually by the wine amateur. When we talk about wine amateur, we know that their consumers are LVMH customers. So therefore, they know what is LVMH, they know what is LV, and they know what kind of wine being produced by LV. Okay. The second thing is about Pernod, which is a little higher level. So they help the brands to have this more strategic collaborations with Wu Liangye, the second ranked baijiu brands in China. Baijiu is also having the biggest market share in terms of alcohol and spirits consumptions in China, very important, and it's rooted in our Chinese culture. So how to do it? That is about more local cultural support. Dedicated design, we're not talking about, we now understand very well. Take away a few sentences. Domestic brands are actually taking proportionally higher popularity on affordable markets. Luxury brands still holding a good position by the international brands. However, in terms of, let's say, premium market, we see more and more, with individual design, we see more and more Chinese elements or Chinese brands racing, which we have to pay a little bit more attention on it. Second one, Guochao is not exclusive. I'm not talking about it anymore. Many industry, cosmetics, skincare, automobile, tech, foods, and beverage, but more should come for sure. Third one, foreign brands are held to pay more efforts to understand the Chinese cultures. So through IP, through branding collaborations, actually, which is somehow linked to the fifth point. So what is very important is to let consumer to understand how good you are at understanding Chinese culture or cultural spirit, therefore to build up the emotional connections. And of course, the third one is the right element to connect. We have talked about Gen Z today, but it's not only. We are talking about also post-80s, which is me. I'm easily be connected with the Guochao elements if you play it right. Or silver economics. Silver in China will have 25% of populations in the coming years. So a big market to play with as well. The silver's generations has a lot of time to spend online and spare time. Actually, I'm very jealous about that. So how to leverage? So this is today's bonus. What's the bonus? A few updates about what happened today. Example for luxury. So I call it Daxue newsletter. The most recent Guochao activations by the luxury industries. So it's fall winter 2020. We can see here, this is really fresh, okay? Couch cooperated a white rabbit again, displayed actually in CIIE, okay? So of course, well, we have this dedicated design combined with candy and couch. Another example, which I personally really liked, is this Ayana area. Interesting things is both Louis Vuitton and Valentino being there, so somehow helped this niche modern place becoming popular. Ayana, before I didn't know that. Anaya, I didn't know that. Where it is? It's like in a very small village of Qinhuangdao in the north of China. I did show a map here to tell you where it is. So it's below. It's North Coastal Village. Okay, what's the feature of Anaya? So niche, modern, a little bit exotic. Once we see the image, we can see it is not very Chinese, but it's somehow, so for Chinese, it's somehow exotic as well. Spiritual. So Anaya actually is a name picking from the Buddhist, Indian Buddhist. So this is somehow show you because we are the biggest nation of Buddhists. So these are also somehow connected together, okay? So it's an unexplored niche area and in China. Okay? So we call it Wang Hong Daka, so KOL area. So people just want to see what happened there. First example. The second, I personally love a newsletter for Louis Vuitton. They have done what they have done. So they just opened a new retail stores with lifestyles elements in Chengdu. Where is Chengdu? Chengdu Taiguili. So it's a trendy shopping area, the most trendiest shopping area in the center of Chengdu, which is southwest China, a very inland capital. So when we talk about Chengdu, we talk about hot pots, we talk about spices, and we also talk about lifestyle, chill life, and mahjong. Very interesting things on the left, up-to-date topic. So we combine this spiritual and local mahjong elements together with this gaming designed with WeChat mini program. So you showed them the up-to-date design. Where I like this design, it's quite cute. You have panda, you have logo, you have this Louis Vuitton logo and different this color, which is quite pale, a little bit. The style of color is also quite popular today. And the third thing is trendy wrapper. I also mentioned before, a few years ago, they are racing. So Ma Siwei, what's the feature? So Ma Siwei is a rapper from Chengdu. His spirits actually is with regional feature. I'm not talking about national, I'm talking about regional features. the accents, the narratives, the personal, the style, and the lyrics. So actually, this guy actually singing or the raps or play the raps with local accents, okay, which is very attractive. So you combine them together, up-to-date topic, trendy rapper, trendy retail. So this is somehow my perception of Guochao. It just happened a few days ago. Let you guys to check out. You have a WeChat mini program to play with. Then we talk about for the food and beverage, the most recent cases I discovered. So Baijiu, again, Baijiu Chinese roots, developed by Luzhou Laojiao. Okay, it's not Wuliangye, it is not Maotai. I talked from very beginning. I said Chinese brands are racing. So what they are doing a very modern lifestyle Baijiu, which is suitable for young consumers to drink. What do you mean by young consumer to drink? They are selling in trendy bars and coffee shop. They cooperate with cocktail. They have lower degree of baijiu with more mild tasting and a little bit sweet. I personally taste it. And you combine it with coffee, a big things to talk about it. Okay, so they have just to collaborate. Let's say that here I also put it this media's title to help you to understand, let you to understand. So combine traditional with model distillations, and after 3 months collaborations with hundreds of bars. Okay, so that's somehow this kind of updated activation help the brand being modernized or becoming trendy or emerging. Starbucks in Fujian, another example in local village. And we talk about the local village as well, features. A village in the southern coastal side in Jinjiang. You can see this mall, mood board. So south coastal here in China, okay, up here. China is the big Starbucks in Fujian, international brands. And when the media talk about this 中国风, okay, the Chinese wind becoming a new trend, okay, combined with traditional culture with new fashion, okay. We can see this architect way and the color displayed and how the flyers being published is somehow with local or regional vibes. Actually, when we talk about Fujian or Jinjiang, it's very chill, lifestyle driven, with this kind of mild wind blowing on your faces, and you can enjoy the oceans and the seafood with Chinese gastronomy in French. We call it gastronomy, cuisine. Very interesting for me. Yes, so by the end, just a little bit differentiation between IP, Guochao, and localizations, and we finish our presentations. So IP, what is IP? Why IP is only one element? It can be leveraged. It can be a brand, can be persona, can be pop symbol, can be a little things to be leveraged as a brand or as a marketing campaign. Okay, Guochao actually is a whole concept. Okay, including a brand, a product, a kind of innovations or activations that are designed with Chinese spirits. I will not repeat again what is Chinese spirits, and I will not repeat Guochao, but up to date, very important. Chinese spirits, very important. Localization, actually localization, we'll talk about brand localization, such as translations or adaptation of your messaging house. So how to translate in a proper way, the right way, but however, with, let's say, no local design thinking or no local innovation involvement. Okay, so that is a little bit the difference between differentiation between the three keywords or conceptual elements. All right, that is end of our presentation. I passed by a little bit minutes, so maybe 3 Q&A.
Yeah. So I see that we already have questions in the question box, in the Q&A box. We're going to answer the first one, and feel free to ask other questions in the meantime. So I'm checking the first one we could choose. You mentioned that Chinese New Year may be more risky with less tolerance from Chinese users. Then which festivals can we use instead?
Do you want to?
Yeah, I can answer. I think, so yeah, I think because I mentioned that I'm quite convinced that Chinese New Year is not necessarily the best opportunity for you as a brand to launch your Chinese capsule, especially if you're just adding the zodiac sign to your product. What I would recommend instead is either if you want to launch it for a specific festival, more like reaching, for example, like the Chinese Valentine's Day, Qixi, or festivals that are actually a slightly less leveraged by a brand compared to Chinese New Year. Or usually like what we're looking at when we're doing case studies of marketing strategy of brands is that considering launching your Chinese capsule, like leveraging Guochao at no specific festival related moment is also a nice move. For example, at a moment where your sales are are more stable, so that you can have a peak based on that. It's usually what most of the brands today are doing. So they're not choosing a specific festivals to avoid the noise around that festival and just focusing on one specific moment in the year that makes sense based on your sales performance.
Yeah, but yeah, Steph, you mentioned about what could be the practice. I will talk about more, let's say, the movements during the CNY, Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year is still one of the most important festivals in China, a good occasions for many brands to leverage. So how to avoid, I think you have to understand and further study what kind of elements to play, how to play in the right way and authentic way. I repeat a few times already, this authenticity is up to date and understanding and tell people how you understand it. Very interesting. I personally think Mahjong with LVMH is very interesting combinations together. Well, it is not the same why related, but it's quite a deeper understanding of this Chengdu spirits. Mahjong, and they did this kind of pronunciation, Mahjong. Okay, very interesting with this gaming. Yeah, I think that is my reply.
Next question, I think it's you mentioned new Chinese policies having a positive impact on Guochao. What are other external or internal factors that pushed it forward? So beyond just the Chinese policies you mentioned. I think like one you also mentioned, Yuan already, that really pushed the Guochao way forward is just the gradual improvement of made in China. Like right now, for most people, made in China is not synonym for copycat or low quality anymore. If you just open Taobao, for example, before you had a lot of copycat, you had a lot of imitation, used to have a little bit, but right now on Taobao, you also have many stores of like Chinese designers who are just pushing their products. So that's the first factor that you already talked about a little bit. There is another one that I would say is a bit more like regarding the current political landscape, with all the views from Western countries, especially from the United States, like the trade war with China, the views from like American or Trump on China, I think really made Gen Z consumers think higher of their own culture and really wanted to support more their own products, their own culture. So it's more of an external factor, global factor. I think it's also pushing forward Guochao. Yeah, that's what I can think of.
Yeah. Two other things, I think one of the reason is that Chinese brands, Chinese productions being optimizing and also have a higher recognitions of Chinese consumers. They don't think made in China is bad quality. On the other hand, we saw before made in China can be a good quality today. So somehow they have a better understanding and also higher appreciations and higher recognitions of Chinese brands by Chinese consumers. So the first reason. The second, I would say, yes, this global, I would say, pandemic also have somehow impacted of people's, let's say, feelings. So as a circle, being impacted by the pandemic, people are, let's say, in the society are tend to be better self-protected and with who appreciate people sharing the same value, same identities, to be to have a let's say a chance to protect themselves. Therefore, with let's say stronger identity recognitions. That is in a very higher level, but somehow have impacted as well, besides many reasons being mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I think it's quite
yeah, I think we can stop here. We have a few other questions, but we'll get back to everyone on email. So if you have questions and we didn't answer today, we'll just send an email with the answer to your question, and also the PowerPoint you can see here, as well as the recording of that webinar.
All right. If you want to follow us, LinkedIn, WeChat newsletter, welcome to follow us as up-to-date information. All right, hope you have a nice day and the night, if some people in China.
Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today.
See you.
Goodbye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.